Some of you might not know this, but I am not a fan of Windows on a handheld, and I have my reasons. But the AYANEO 2S might be the first Windows handheld that completely changes my opinion. In fact, throughout this video, I'll explain why I haven't touched my Steamdeck since receiving the AYANEO 2S, but not before going over what almost ruined my entire experience with it. And if you're new here, my name is Tyler Price, my channel is 24 Concept, and this is my AYANEO 2S review. The AYANEO 2S is one of many handhelds offered by AYANEO. It's got a very familiar layout with no tricks or gimmicks and a front face that is basically one sheet of glass that makes the 2S look and feel like one of the most premium handhelds out there. On the front, you have a really nice 1920 by 1200 display that, despite being a portrait native display, is one of the nicest looking displays I've seen on a handheld, albeit only 60 Hz. You get two offset Hall effect joysticks with RGB, a super solid D-pad, and some equally solid face buttons set up in a classic ABXY style. Below that, you get a couple buttons, one of which is linked to your AYANEO software, which we'll get to more in a bit. And on the other side, you get some standard start and select buttons. On the top, you have quite a bit going on. You have Hall effect triggers that feel good, albeit a bit flappy and hollow. Some decent shoulder buttons, along with two additional smaller shoulder buttons that are mappable to whatever you like. Out of the box, they'll be mapped to pulling up the on-screen keyboard, which is really useful, Task Manager, Escape, and Task View when short pressing and long pressing respectively. From left to right, you have the power button, which is also a fingerprint reader for Windows Hello, a volume rocker, which is relatively easy to hit while gaming, two USB 4 Type-C ports, great for charging and outputting to a larger display, and the other half is literally an exhaust, which, let me tell you, the cooling on this thing is top notch. On the bottom of the 2S, you get some stereo speakers that are about what you would expect. They're decently loud, but definitely not great, mainly because they're down firing, but they get the job done. You also get another USB-C port, though this one is only USB 3.2, so keep that in mind, along with a micro SD slot and a 3.5mm headphone jack. On the back, you have nothing but a huge air intake that, quite frankly, gets literally cold when in use. It's kind of nice, actually. I found myself putting my hand over it to get a nice little cool breeze while gaming. Below that are two slits that at first looked like additional cavities for the speakers, but when covering up the bottom speakers, nothing comes out. So I'm not entirely sure what these are. If you know what they are, let me know in the comments. You'll notice there are no rear remappable buttons on the 2S. This might be a deal breaker for some of you, but personally, I never use them. So for me, this was fine. But if you're someone who relies on those rear buttons, you're just not going to get them here. With that, the AYANEO 2S comes running Windows 11 Home, and my model has 32GB of RAM and a 2TB SSD, along with the Ryzen 7 7840U, which is standard in all 2S models. This means it has the Radeon 780M graphics chip, giving you 12 graphics cores and RDNA 3 support, meaning it'll chew through most games you throw at it. Within reason. But enough about hardware, let's talk about software. If any of you have been following along my recent little 2S journey on X/Twitter, you'll know I had a hell of a time getting it set up. What started out as an innocent Windows reset quickly turned into a blue screen of death nightmare. Take this as your serious warning not to perform a Windows reset on this device. It will certainly ruin your machine and will require you to fresh install the OS from a backup drive, re-download all the drivers and software, along with having to use a keyboard, mouse, and a dongle in order to get things back up and running. So don't do it. Instead, watch me do it, so you don't have to. So I'll take this time to also tell you that repairability on the 2S is pretty solid. They also include a guide on how to disassemble the device, along with a nice separation tool and some anti-scratch stickers to keep your system looking clean. It's the little things that really make a difference in user experience. In order to take it apart, you need to first remove the decorative side pieces on either hand grip, along with removing the triggers with a firm pull that then reveals several screws. Remove them all, painfully pry open the plastic shell, and boom. You're in. No ribbon cables, no ultra-sensitive components sticking out, just simple rear shell removal. Not bad. Now, originally I had taken the 2S apart to see if the SSD had come unlodged or needed to be reseated. After reseating the SSD and checking for any other obvious issues, I tried rebooting and, well, you get the idea. Still dead. At this point, I had almost given up on the 2S because, to be honest, I'm so sick of Windows ruining handheld experiences. Why give me Windows if I can't use things like reset my PC without completely bricking it? Heck, some games would have trouble launching because Windows does Windows things and tries to launch your game in a wonky resolution, resulting in countless restarts and time spent trying just to make things work. It's frustrating. But okay, so maybe that's not entirely AYANEO's fault. It's highly unlikely you'll ever need to reinstall Windows, right? Well, if you plan on selling this handheld to someone other than a friend or family member, this is a major problem, especially if you're lacking the skills to get it back up and running. So TLDR, don't perform a Windows reset on this device unless you're ready to clean install Windows manually. Outside that disaster, Windows was surprisingly good on the 2S. Navigation was simple thanks to the joystick mouse control, and once I figured out how to pull up the keyboard, I was pretty happy. Of course, if you wanted, you could plug in a keyboard and mouse and just use it like a laptop, but for the sake of reviewing the 2S as a handheld, I stuck mostly to using the controller as my way to get around. Now, AYANEO does have their own little software like any other handheld, which is called AYASpace. My overall experience with AYASpace was been really good, to be honest. I didn't really mess with the mobile app or any of that nonsense, but AYASpace worked better than any of the other software suites I've used. Besides SteamOS, of course, and had a simple and clean interface. No bogus storefront trying to sell you things, just simple, easy to navigate menus and all your games in one place should you prefer to launch them through AYASpace. Now, you'll have to help AYASpace find your games by pointing it to your games folder the first time, but once you do, all your games will load here, and you can relatively easily launch them all from this UI. Better yet, you can even tell AYASpace to launch minimize when you turn the 2S on if you're like me and just prefer to use Windows to run your games, which, spoiler alert, I primarily only launched games from Steam as all the games I've been playing are currently available there. As far as settings go, you get everything you need in here, from performance tuning to gyro controls. I won't spend too much time in here, but AYANEO did a great job on AYASpace 2.0 in my opinion. It annoyed me the least out of all the others and was actually pretty useful most of the time. Additionally, the quick access menu is probably the best part of AYASpace in my opinion. Although it minimizes your game, which is a bit annoying, the quick access menu gives you everything you need and more, all within a smooth and clean UI. The first thing you'll see are performance settings, allowing you to tune your 2S however you like with some pre-made performance modes along with more specific tuning options like FPS limit, TDP limit, and some custom fan settings. If you're someone who knows what they want and likes to tinker with these settings, you'll be happy to know they're here, along with more options available in the full AYASpace app. For the rest of you, like me, you likely won't mess around in here too much other than the performance modes. I recommend keeping the system unbalanced with a 60 FPS limit and 15 watt TDP limit. I found that in most gaming scenarios, these settings net you the best performance and battery life without sacrificing too much on quality. But what was the performance like? Generally speaking, the performance on the 2S was great. Every game I threw at it played very well, with the exception of Dragon's Dogma 2, which I admit may have been a bit of a stretch, although everyone else is telling me that their handhelds can run it, so I'm not sure if maybe my handheld is not doing something right, or maybe I'm just doing something right. Anyway, doesn't matter. That being said, keep in mind, not all games will run natively on an APU. Most will, but some don't. Which ones will? Which ones won't? To be honest, I'm not entirely sure. Many of you often ask me if X handheld will run Y game, and most of the time the answer is probably, if you set it up right. And the reason I say that is because on a Windows handheld, you're not going to get a little icon telling you how playable a game may be. A lot of it is just trial and error. That being said, the 2S will play games on Steam, as well as games like Need for Speed Unbound that require third-party app sign-ins. While I don't do benchmarks on my channel, I did play Horizon Zero Dawn, Need for Speed Unbound, and Fallout 4, and got a solid 40 to 50 FPS in most cases on medium or high settings at the native resolution, occasionally getting 55 to 60 FPS in some places. Upscaling is a great option, but I found that I prefer the image quality of native resolution over upscaling, even if it meant losing 10 FPS in game. The 7840U runs games well at 1080p or even 1200p, so most of the time I kept upscaling off. Although games with AMD's RSR did seem to look much better when enabled, like MotoGP 23, which ran at almost a locked 60 FPS at max settings and looked absolutely gorgeous. Much better than on Steamdeck. So your mileage may vary. I do want to mention that I didn't play any non-Steam games during my time with the 2S, although they should all work fine, mostly. Can you make games work with a bunch of workarounds and settings? Yes. Should you? Well, that's up to you, and that's quite frankly what some people love about Windows. But in my opinion, handheld gaming devices such as this are made for single-player titles, or just time-killer games like Slay the Spire or Brotato. While the 2S is capable of playing some AAA titles and esports titles, don't expect it to completely replace your Xbox or your PlayStation just yet. That being said, if this isn't your only gaming machine, then the 2S is also a great handheld for things like Steam Link, Xbox Game Pass, and GeForce Now, assuming you have a strong internet connection. TLDR, performance was very good at 1080p or 1200p. Not groundbreaking, but definitely good enough for most games. And it goes without saying, but any 2D games ran perfectly. Games like Slay the Spire or Brotato will run at 60 FPS at 1200p without a hitch, and even last more than a couple hours on battery. You know, in case 2D games are your thing. One thing I did notice while gaming is that pushing the TDP from 15 watts to 33 watts didn't really increase performance directly, at least not how I expected it. I tried Horizon Zero Dawn, MotoGP 23, Need for Speed Unbound, and Fallout 4 on both 15 watt and 33 watt, and saw very little performance difference. Okay, Future Tyler here. I'm actually editing this part of the video right now, and as you saw, I was playing Horizon Zero Dawn, and I was playing at both 15 watts and 33 watts without changing any settings. Everything remained the same, and the FPS difference was like less than 5. In other titles though, like Need for Speed Unbound, for example, doing the same thing did actually show like a 15 FPS difference. So I'm not entirely sure why that is. I'm gonna chop it up as it's Windows. There's a lot of variables that could change and affect performance from title to title to title. It's not always consistent. I'm not diving deep enough into the technical aspect of why that is the case, but generally speaking, bumping the AYANEO 2S from 15 watts to 33 watts was not some major game-changing like turbo button like it felt on the Ally, rather more of a headroom option if you were playing a title and just, you know, you understood sort of how to gain more FPS from that additional power. So wanted to throw that out there because I wasn't going to be able to describe it in just text. So hopefully that clears it up a little bit. While you can expect a small bump in performance, in my experience, pushing the 2S beyond 15 watts didn't seem to really do much more than drain the battery quicker, which, by the way, is 50.25 watt hour. It was enough to get me through most gaming sessions without worrying about charging, but if you're going to play anything that's 3D, then expect an hour or two tops on battery. Speaking of power, I also didn't see any performance increases when plugging the 2S into power. This is likely due to the fact that the 2S will give you all its available power on battery, unlike some handhelds like the ROG Ally. So don't expect a performance boost when plugging in the charger, which honestly I'm totally okay with because it means I don't need the charger in order to get the maximum performance. Speaking of the charger, AYANEO provides the best included charger I've seen. This thing has 2 USB-C ports and 2 USB-A ports for a max output of 100 watts, allowing you to not only charge the 2S, but also any other accessories you might have with you. In a world where some devices don't even come with a cable anymore, AYANEO hooks you up big time, so big thumbs up for that. I found that the charger would charge my 2S pretty quickly, probably not as fast as my Steamdeck OLED or the Ally, but quick enough to where I never felt like I had to be tethered to a wall outlet. Another nice thing I forgot to mention is that you can charge from any of the 3 USB-C ports on the 2S, giving you some flexibility depending on where you are in relation to the wall outlet. Now as for the case, yikes. Not a fan of this one. This is the case. Very simple. Not only does it feel much less premium than everything else in the box, it also won't fit the charger very easily, which is a bit of a letdown. The case really feels like an afterthought and feels more like a generic zip-up case with AYANEO printed on it, rather than a 2S specific case, which is a bit of a letdown considering the rest of the packaging is so premium. You know who does make great cases for handhelds? Tomtoc. I recently did a review of one of their Steamdeck cases, and they recently sent me one of their slick sling bags, which conveniently fits the 2S, the charger, and even an extra controller. I do wish it had joystick protection, but still a better alternative to the included one, so if you're looking for a great case for your handheld, check out the link in the description. Case aside, the overall packaging for the 2S was super high quality, and every document felt super premium. It's a weird thing, but when you're spending $1,000 plus on a handheld, you start to expect as much. AYANEO did a great job making sure all the documentation was well printed, along with these super nice frosted plastic dividers that just seem to add a little extra pizzazz. Below that, it's just simple labeled compartments with all your accessories. top tier unboxing experience in my opinion and makes your investment feel that much better. Make the carrying case nicer, and this might be the best unboxing experience I've seen for a handheld. The AYANEO 2S is far from being the perfect gaming handheld. It's heavy, isn't super comfortable to hold for long periods of time despite being much smaller than the Steamdeck, only has a 60Hz display, runs Windows 11, and is a bit expensive at over $1,000. That being said, it's still the best Windows gaming handheld experience I've had yet. And while it's a bit heavy and uncomfortable to hold for larger hands, I absolutely loved the glass on top and the premium feeling controls. And even though the display is only 60Hz, I loved the overall quality and sheer pixel density, something I wish was better on the Steamdeck. On the flip side, I wish the display got a bit dimmer in low light environments because I often played the 2S in bed and found that even at its lowest brightness setting, it was still much brighter than any other device I own. I'm still not a fan of the right stick being closer to the bottom of the device and would much prefer the layout on the Steamdeck even if it made the 2S bigger. And the speakers were super average and kind of a letdown at this price point. Speaking of a letdown, AYANEO talks a lot about their haptic feedback in the controller, but I don't think I ever felt the 2S vibrate and can't find any other settings other than a basic rumble level, which I set to high from the beginning. A small detail, but something worth noting. All in all, I was pretty happy with the 2S, despite it being a Windows handheld. There's a certain charm about it that I really enjoyed, and to be completely clear, it performed really well. So in the end, I think the AYANEO 2S is a great handheld, Windows 11 hiccups aside. I personally love the design and premium fit and finish, as well as the great looking display and great feeling controls. ISpace was definitely a highlight feature that made Windows much more tolerable and one step closer to making the 2S feel more like a console rather than a PC with a controller. It's not quite there yet, but it's damn close. And while I maybe wouldn't recommend it for everyone, I think if you're looking for a premium Windows gaming handheld, this one should definitely be on your list. For everyone else, I think there's more affordable options out there, even from AYANEO themselves. But that's gonna be it for this one. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like button, and as always, make sure to subscribe to see more content like this. You can follow me on X, TikTok, and Instagram at xxiv_concept. That's 24concept, earn your Roman numerals. I also want to give a huge shout out to channel friend Deckverse for sending the 2S for us to review in exchange for our ROG Ally. Timo was kind enough to send over not only the 2S, but also some additional goodies, so huge thanks to him for making this review possible. You can follow him on X at tdeckverse, as well as check out his channel here on YouTube down in the description. All right, guys, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.